Alright, as most of you know, one of my favorite things to do is shoot at extreme long range. Now, I get no bigger kick than taking a cartridge and pushing it to the absolute limits of its capability out of the platform that I'm shooting it out of. Typically that is at extreme long range. Now, extreme long range can mean many different things to many different people. For you, it may be anything past 1,000 yards, past 1,200 yards. For me, typically, what I consider extreme long range is anything beyond where the bullet has passed through the transonic barrier. Now, there's also some exceptions to that. There are many cartridges that shooting out beyond the transonic barrier is out at distances that would without a doubt be considered extreme long range. And for cartridges like that, I would typically just say anything beyond a mile. But as you guys know, one of my favorite things to do is shoot at these distances. And there's a lot of things that are involved in shooting at these distances, and one of the major things that I think is often overlooked and people that will frustrate you if you are not aware of this is the conditions. The conditions of everything have to be right to be able to shoot out at these distances. Now, what do I mean by the conditions? I don't just mean by the weather conditions, I mean by the conditions of the actual ground that you're shooting on. So if you guys have been following me for any amount of time, you remember earlier in the year where I was shooting at extreme long range as the crops had just been planted in the fields that I shoot in. And I called that during that time my ELR season. And why do I do that? Because at that time it's hot outside, so the ground is drying very fast. So even if it rains, typically that rain doesn't stick around. The ground dries up very quickly, and when the ground dries up very quickly, the fields have just been tilled up to be planted, and all that allows for me to really be able to spot my shots. One of the things that comes along with ELR is missing. Typically when I'm shooting ELR, if you guys have been watching, you know at the largest I'm shooting at a 24-inch plate. At these distances that I'm shooting at, typically that plate is around 1 minute of angle. When you're looking at putting a bullet in flight for beyond 4.5, 5 seconds, and going slower than the speed of sound, when it hits the ground, you really need the conditions of the ground to be right for you to be able to see where that bullet landed. There's some other ways that I go about being able to, the conditions being right for me to be able to spot my shots. A lot of the times you'll see me shoot when the ground, when it has just rained. Like right now, it is very cold outside. As you guys can see, I'm dressed for winter. And when it's like this, it doesn't really matter how long we go without rain. The ground pretty much never dries up. It never gets warm enough for the water on the ground and the mud to actually evaporate. So on days like this and this time of year, what I'm looking for is days where it rains or snows and that snow is melted off, and I can get out and shoot at those extreme distances, because at that time I'm able to typically spot my shots. Now, spotting your shot is absolutely important because, like I said, you're gonna miss when it comes to extreme long range. A first round cold bore impact is very rare in extreme long range. Now, I have videos where I have shot cold bore impacts out to, I do believe, even as far as 2,200 yards, but that is not the normal. It is very unlikely that you're going to be able to read conditions where your bullet is in flight for 5 seconds and read those conditions, those wind gradients. So there's many different sections of what we call wind gradients. As that bullet gets higher in the air, the higher it gets, the different the wind is acting up at those higher distances, and we call those wind gradients. So it's almost impossible to be able to read that. So there's a lot of luck involved when it comes to first round impacts at ELR distances. So because of that, we need to be able to spot our misses to adjust to get on plate. And this is a video, what I'm going to show you guys at the end of this is a video that I did the other day where I was shooting this at 2,400 yards, my 7 SAUM, shooting the 197 Match King, and was able to, in 4 shots, get on the IPSC plate, which is actually a little bit smaller than the 24-inch plate, at 2,400 yards in only 4 shots, and had to do some unconventional things to spot my shot. So that's what I wanted to talk about, is how we go about spotting our shots at extreme long range. And this can also help you at closer distances, but one of the things about closer distances, when your bullet is still supersonic, typically, even when the ground is wet, when you're not going to see a huge bullet splash, typically when you have conditions like that, when the bullet is traveling above the speed of sound, it still has enough velocity to make some sort of a splash where if you're really paying attention, if you're really on target when that bullet gets down there, you're going to be able to spot your shot. But ELR is a totally different story. I have lots of people ask me about shooting ELR, and one of the things that's hard to explain to them is spotting your shot. Now, one of the things that can help with that tremendously, and what you'll see me use in this video, is a spotting scope. A lot of the times I'm shooting without a spotter. I'll be running the camera through the spotting scope, and that helps me, which is what you guys will see in this video, where I'm able to shoot, stop, go back, check the spotting scope, because I wasn't able to spot it with my actual scope. Lots of times, no matter how good of a scope you have, no matter how good the glass is, no matter how clean you keep it, all those things, you're not going to be able to spot your misses at ELR distances with just your standard rifle scope. And I'm talking about the best scopes in the world. Even those scopes are it's going to be very difficult to spot your misses. So in those cases, this is where a spotting scope comes in extremely handy. Now, obviously, I've been using the Hawk Endurance ED spotting scope here for quite a while. That's what all the videos I've been doing lately have been filmed through this Hawk Endurance. I have a full review that will be coming up on this here in the near future. But one of the things that you're going to need to get is a spotting scope for ELR distances. When I'm shooting my 7 SAUM here, obviously it's a small 7mm bullet, and spotting the impact of a 7mm bullet at those distances is not always easy. A lot of times I'll go out and set a plate up and think that the conditions are right, the ground is wet enough for me to be able to spot my impacts, and it's still not. A lot of times the bullet just gets absorbed by the ground and you'll never see it even through the spotting scope. So what happened in this video, and this is what made me actually think of doing this video, what you guys are getting ready to see, is I went out to shoot actually my 7 SAUM at 2,600 yards. So you'll see a plate that's off to the left that I had originally planned to shoot. I had 10 rounds loaded up to do my, as you guys know how I do it, I shoot 10 rounds. If I don't hit my target, then we're done for the day on that particular shot with that particular rifle. And I shot 5 rounds and was never able to spot my shots even through the spotting scope. The conditions down there at the 2,600 yard target were just not good enough. The ground wasn't wet enough. The bullets were just getting absorbed immediately, and there was no way to see splash. So I had to come into the target that I had set up at 2,400 yards. Now, the target I had set up at 2,400 yards was actually planned for my 6 Creedmoor. I did the same thing at that 2,400 yard target with the 6 Creedmoor. I shot 5 rounds, was never able to spot one of them. So when you're looking at shooting something as small as a 6mm out at these distances, even when they're just beyond transonic or subsonic, when they've just went into subsonic, even if they're traveling 1,000 feet per second, that's still such a small bullet that the foot-pounds of energy when it hits the ground are so small that a lot of times you're still not going to see bullet splash. So I was able to, at that distance, still see the bullet splash with my 7 SAUM, but the only way I was able to see it was through the spotting scope. So you're going to see me shoot a couple of shots and then have to go check the spotting scope to spot my miss, and then come back and very quickly get on target. So that's something I wanted to mention. Sometimes ELR shooting, where there's a will, there's a way. It's not always easy. It's not always being able to spot your shots right off the bat and get on plate. Like I said, you guys know the time of year where I really try to push my rifles is that time of year where the crops have just been planted, because I know I'm really going to have no problem spotting my misses and getting on plate. But when it's not that time of year, when I'm trying to push the limits and the conditions just aren't right, so these are some of the things I have to do. So I hope you guys enjoy it. Here it is. See you guys next time. Alright, so downrange, 2,400 yards. It's almost dark. It's going to be hard to spot, so I opted to do 2,400 instead of something else I had in mind we'll be doing soon. I've got the 7 SAUM, 197 Match King load, 2,401 yards, which we actually just did the other day. Shooting at the IPSC this time. I want to see. We can't knock this thing out again here in fairly short order. I got 5 rounds sitting here. Oh, can we do this in 5 or less?
Okay, so I think I saw that. I think I did. We're going to stop and check the spotting scope footage real quick. Okay, we saw where that landed. That was right in front. Well, we need to come up a touch. I think we can get this done. Okay. Impact. Alright, we got that done in 4. You saw what I had to do. No spotter. I had to spot my own shot. Or I had to try to spot my own shot. Come off the rifle, go check spotting scope footage, come back on it, and get on plate. Alright, so there it is. Getting it done in short order with no spotter. Spotting for myself, stopping in the middle. Having to check the spotting scope, shooting like right up there. 2,401 yards, 197 Match King. When there's a will, there's a way.